Week 8 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few plays I look to buy and trade for this week. The first play, Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. So for the most part, it's been a solid year for Devonta Smith. Besides a couple hiccups here and there, obviously with a concussion in week 4. And now here in week 7, he didn't do much at the New York Giants at all. One catch for -2 yards. So after coming off a bad performance like that for Devonta Smith, this is a perfect time for fantasy owners to go out there and buy him, because this season in PPR leagues, all double-digit fantasy games he had in the 4 games he played before the Week 7 matchup at the New York Giants. So maybe he's still not 100% coming off the concussion a few weeks ago as Devonta Smith, but we know he's a game-breaker type of wide receiver, and he still hasn't had that patented 25, 30-point fantasy game. So with the next couple weeks, decent matchups coming up at Cincinnati in Week 8 and Jacksonville in Week 9. I think Devonta Smith, he's due for a monster performance. Like I said, he's had good games, no doubt about it, this season. But after coming off a 1-catch, -2-yard game, and the numbers a little bit down this season, he's a perfect buy low candidate this week. The next player, Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. So Tank Dell, he had a goose egg as well in Week 7 at the Green Bay Packers. And that Packer defense, they're vicious defense with tight coverage and creating turnovers. So Dell, he's number 2 wide receiver right now for this Houston Texan team. Obviously with Nico Collins out a few more weeks with the hamstring injury. And Tank Dell, over the last few weeks, Week 3 in Minnesota, a decent game. Then he missed Week 4. And the last couple weeks versus Buffalo, he didn't do much in that one in Week 5. 4 catches, 38 yards. Week 6 in New England, a nice game, 7 for 57 and a touchdown. And then Week 7, a goose egg in that one. So anytime a guy comes off a goose egg and we know he's got talent and upside, it's a perfect time, I believe, for fantasy owners to go out there and get him. So right now, Tank Dell, he didn't show up in last week's ball game. This week, a better matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts. Indoor game back home for this Houston Texan team. Tank Dell's going to turn things around, and a perfect buy low play this week. Next player, Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. He's been pretty much non-existent for fantasy football over the last 4 or 5 weeks is Jalen Waddle. But now with a possibility Tua returns in Week 8, this offense could kick it back to gear. I know Tua is not going to be 100% most likely, even though he's taking a lot of time now, 6-7 weeks to return and get back to 100% health after another massive concussion for Tua in Week 2 versus the Buffalo Bills. But Jalen Waddle, like I said, a couple years ago when Tua didn't play, he struggled. And now this season, the games he didn't play, he struggled as well as Jalen Waddle. But this offense, if it could even get to 80% to where they were, if Tua was not 100%, everyone's going to benefit, especially Jalen Waddle. So right now is the time to go out there and get him while he's not doing much and his value is super low. The next play is CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys were on a bye week. CeeDee Lamb, I know, was a top 3, top 4 player, worst case, going in most fantasy drafts. He's put up some good ball games, no doubt about it, this CeeDee Lamb, but his best game in PPR leagues this season is 7 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown Week 4 at the Giants. In the last couple of weeks, the numbers have dropped off a little bit. So Week 8, coming off by tough matchup at San Francisco, a team, the Dallas Cowboys, no doubt about it, have had trouble throughout their career verse. But CeeDee Lamb, we know he's a good wide receiver. Like I said, this season in PPR leagues, 5 out of 6 games, double-digit fantasy points. But he just hasn't had that patented 30-plus fantasy point game. And a few games as well where he's only in that 11 to 15-point range. So right now, he's still putting up good numbers, no doubt about it, just not those elite numbers where he was drafted to CeeDee Lamb. He's a buy low player this week. The next buy low, C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans. C.J. Stroud, we know he's a great quarterback, one of the better quarterbacks in the league. But he's just missing on some weeks as well as C.J. Stroud of getting those big performances. So this season, only 4 games over 20 fantasy points for C.J. Stroud in the first 7. I know he went 4th, 5th round in most fantasy drafts. You would expect a little bit more. But now after a poor performance at the Green Bay Packers, where they really bottled them up in that game for 86 yards and 19 rush yards in Week 7, it's a great matchup here in Week 8 versus the Indianapolis Colts, where their defense has had trouble all season long besides last week. But that was the Miami Dolphins with Tyler Huntley. Then he went down and Tim Boyle coming in. So I think Stroud, he could get back on track. Houston going back home after the last 2 ball games were on the road. And Stroud, we know he's a good quarterback, and we've seen it in his early career. It's very rare for him to have 2 bad games in a row. So right now, after probably the worst performance he'll have all season, is Stroud. He's a buy low player this week. The next buy low, Davante Adams of the New York Jets. Davante Adams, obviously not 100% up to snuff with the playbook, but he still got good target share in that ball game. 9 targets in the 37-15 loss at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So him and obviously Aaron Rodgers have a great rapport going back to those great seasons in Green Bay where Rodgers won a few MVPs with Davante Adams at the wide receiver position. But it's one thing with Rodgers, obviously he's 40 years old now. He's not the same Rodgers he was, where a lot of people think he's still that top of the line quarterback. Well, good quarterback is Rodgers, no doubt about it, but some games he's going to be inconsistent, and we're going to see that with Adams as well. But like I said, Adams only one game with the New York Jets under his belt, still trying to pick up the playbook is Davante Adams, but still a good sign. 9 targets in last week's ball game, and the New York Jets the next few weeks, some better matchups coming up for them. New England in week 8 and Houston in week 9. So I think Adams, after not a great game in his New York Jet debut, could go out there and help fantasy owners and could be a good buy low option this week. And the final player I look to buy and trade for is Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers. So Jordan Mason, he's been solid all season long for this Niner team, but his numbers have definitely dropped off over the last few weeks here, where 9 or less fantasy points the last 3 weeks in a row is Jordan Mason. So Jordan Mason, he's a great talent, obviously filling in for Christian McCaffrey, but now the shoulder injuries definitely played a factor in last week's ball game, and a tough matchup as well versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So like I said, the last 3 games he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points is Jordan Mason. This is a time for fantasy owners to go out there and get him. I know Christian McCaffrey is going to try to ramp things up and hope he's back week 10, week 11 for this San Francisco 49er team. But even at then, I don't think McCaffrey's going to be 100% the running back over there, where Mason, I still believe, has earned some playing time. So right now, while the numbers are down, and probably Mason owners, they're worried that McCaffrey's going to be back sooner than later. He's a buy low candidate this week, so that's a few plays I look to buy and trade for week 8 of the fantasy football season.